In the shadowy halls of Styles Court, a 20-year-old murder mystery grips the present as Hercule Poirot unravels the chilling death of Eleanor Marwood, poisoned at a lavish dinner. A vanished necklace with a hidden diamond, a secret room, stolen, notes and a web of lies among suspects. Each clue pulls Poirot closer to a killer who's desperate to keep the truth buried. Will his legendary little gray cells expose the murderer before another crime strikes? The rain fell in a relentless drizzle, cloaking the London streets in a gray veil that seemed to seep into Hercule Poirot's very bones. He sat by the window of his modest flat in Whitehaven Mansions, his small, neat figure wrapped in a woolen shawl despite the warmth of the coal fire crackling in the hearth. His once sharp eyes, now dimmed by age, gazed out at the blurred figures hurrying along the pavement below. At 72, Poirot felt the weight of time more keenly than ever, his movements slower, his hands trembling faintly as they rested on the arms of his chair. Yet his mind, those little gray cells he so often praised, remained as sharp as a freshly honed blade. Beside him, on a polished mahogany table, lay a small pile of letters, meticulously opened and arranged by his loyal valet, George. Most were mundane, invitations to dinners he no longer attended, requests for lectures he no longer gave. But one letter, delivered that morning, had stirred something in Poirot's heart, a flicker of curiosity, a spark of the old fire that had once driven him to unravel the most perplexing of mysteries. It was this letter he now held, its creamy paper slightly yellowed at the edges, its handwriting elegant but hurried, as though penned in haste or agitation. "Mon vieux," came a voice from the doorway, hearty and familiar, breaking Poirot's reverie. Captain Arthur Hastings, his oldest friend and occasional chronicler, stood there, his face weathered but still boyishly earnest. His hair, once a sandy brown, was now streaked with silver, but his posture retained the upright vigor of a man who had never quite left his military days behind. "You've been staring at that letter for the better part of an hour. What's got you so pensive?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his mustache, still impeccably waxed, though thinner now, twitching slightly. "Hastings, mon ami, you have the timing of a Swiss clock. Come, sit. There is something here that may interest even your so-English soul." Hastings chuckled, easing himself into an armchair opposite Poirot. The room, with its orderly shelves of books, polished furniture, and faint scent of lavender polish, was a testament to Poirot's love of symmetry and precision. A small silver tray held a teapot and 2 cups, steam curling lazily from the spout. Hastings poured himself a cup, then leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "Well, go on then. What's this letter about? Not another case, surely. I thought you'd retired from all that." "Retired, yes," Poirot said, his voice soft but with a trace of indignation. "But the mind, it does not retire, Hastings. It demands exercise, stimulation. And this," he tapped the letter gently, "this is most stimulating indeed." He handed the letter to Hastings, who unfolded it with care. The paper bore the faint crest of Styles Court, the grand Essex estate where, decades ago, Poirot had solved his first English case, the mysterious affair at Styles. The memory of that case, its labyrinth of motives, its cast of suspects, and the triumphant moment when Poirot had unraveled the truth, still brought a gleam to his eye. Hastings, too, felt a pang of nostalgia as he recognized the crest, his mind drifting to those younger days when he and Poirot had been an unstoppable duo. The letter read, "Dear Monsieur Poirot, I trust this letter finds you in good health, though. I know the years weigh heavily on us all. I write to you from Styles Court, where I now reside as its caretaker. You may recall the tragic events of 1905, when Miss Eleanor Marwood met her untimely end here. The case remains unsolved, a stain upon this house and its history. I have reason to believe that new evidence has come to light, evidence that only a mind such as yours could interpret. I implore you to visit Styles once more. There are those here who know more than they have ever admitted, and I fear the truth may slip away forever if you do not act. Please come at your earliest convenience. I shall ensure your comfort. Yours sincerely. Margaret Langley Hastings lowered the letter, his brow furrowed. Eleanor Marwood? I don't recall that name from our time at Styles. Was that before or after our case there? Before, mon ami, Poirot replied, his fingers steepled before him in that familiar gesture of contemplation. The murder of Mademoiselle Marwood occurred in 1905, some years before you and I arrived at Styles to investigate the death of Madame Inglethorpe. I was not involved in the Marwood case, but I heard of it, a most perplexing affair. Poison, administered at a dinner party with no clear culprit. The police, they floundered, as they so often do, without the guidance of Hercule Poirot. Hastings grinned at Poirot's unabashed self-confidence, a trait that age had not diminished. And this Margaret Langley? She thinks there's new evidence? After 20 years? Sounds like a wild goose chase, if you ask me. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. But the wild goose, it sometimes leads to the most unexpected truths. And Styles, Hastings, Styles calls to me. It is where we began, you and I. To return there, to solve a mystery that has lingered for 2 decades. It is a challenge I cannot resist. Hastings leaned back, sipping his tea. Well, I suppose I'm game. It's been ages since we've had a proper adventure. But are you sure you're up for it, old chap? It's a long journey to Essex, and you're not as spry as you once were. Poirot's eyes flashed with mock indignation. Not as spry? Hastings, the body may weaken, but the mind of Hercule Poirot is as agile as ever. I shall go to Styles, and you, my friend, shall accompany me. We shall see what secrets this Madame Langley has uncovered. The decision made, Poirot felt a surge of energy he had not known in months. He rang for George, instructing him to pack for a week's stay in the country. Hastings, too, made arrangements, his enthusiasm growing at the prospect of revisiting Styles. By the following morning, they were aboard a train bound for Essex, the countryside rolling past in a blur of green fields and mist-shrouded hills. Styles Court, when they arrived, was a shadow of its former grandeur. The once manicured lawns were overgrown, the ivy-clad walls peeling in places, and the windows stared blankly at the approaching visitors. The air carried the damp chill of early autumn, and Poirot pulled his coat tighter around him as they stepped from the taxi. Hastings, ever the optimist, remarked on the charm of the place despite its neglect. But Poirot's eyes were already scanning the surroundings, noting the faded elegance, the air of secrets long buried. They were greeted at the door by Margaret Langley, a woman in her late 50s with a stern face softened by anxious eyes. Her gray hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her hands twisted nervously as she welcomed them. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I cannot thank you enough for coming, she said, ushering them into a dimly lit hall. The air smelled of old wood and wax polish, and a grand staircase loomed ahead, its banister dulled by time. Madame Langley, Poirot said, bowing slightly despite the ache in his back. Your letter, it was most intriguing. Tell me, what is this new evidence you speak of, and why, after 20 years, does it surface now? Margaret hesitated, glancing toward the closed doors of the drawing room. It's complicated, Monsieur Poirot. There are others here, guests, residents, who may know more than I. I thought it best to wait until you could meet them all. They're gathered for dinner tonight, and I've arranged for you both to join us. Poirot's mustache twitched. A dinner, you say? Most fitting, considering the history of this house. Very well, madame. We shall dine and observe. But tell me, who are these others? Margaret led them to a small parlor where they could rest before dinner. As they settled, she provided a brief rundown of the household. There was Clara Whitmore, a reclusive widow who had inherited part of the estate and lived in near seclusion in the West Wing. Then there was Edward Grayson, a young historian researching the Marwood family for a book, whose discoveries had stirred old tensions. Finally, there was Inspector Harold Vance, a retired detective who had worked the original Marwood case and now lived nearby, haunted by his failure to solve it. Others, including a former maid from 1905 and a distant Marwood cousin, would also be present, drawn by the anniversary of Eleanor's death. An eclectic group, Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming with interest. and each, no doubt, with their own secrets. Hastings, mon ami, do you not find it curious that so many connected to a 20-year-old crime are gathered here now? Curious and a bit suspicious, Hastings replied, warming his hands by the fire. Sounds like someone stirring the pot deliberately. Précisément, Poirot said, and it is for Hercule Poirot to discover why. As evening fell, the dining room of Styles Court came alive with the clink of glass and the murmur of voices. The long table set with faded silver and chipped porcelain was a far cry from the opulence of 1905, but it still carried an air of formality. Poirot, dressed impeccably in a black suit, his mustache waxed to perfection, took his seat beside Hastings, his eyes darting from face to face. Clara Whitmore, the widow, sat at the head of the table, her face pale and drawn, her fingers clutching a lace handkerchief. Edward Grayson, the historian, was a wiry young man with spectacles and an eager manner, his notebook never far from hand. Inspector Vance, grizzled and weathered, seemed uncomfortable in his formal attire, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. The former, maid, now elderly and frail, sat quietly, her hands trembling as she sipped her soup. The Marwood cousin, a boisterous man named Lionel, filled the room with loud anecdotes, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Margaret Langley, acting as hostess, introduced. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. The morning sun struggled through the heavy clouds that hung over Styles Court, casting a pale, watery light across the estate. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of his guest room, his small frame silhouetted against the gray dawn. The room, though clean, bore the marks of neglect. Faded wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the once luxurious curtains were threadbare. He adjusted his tie with precise movements, his mustache immaculate despite the early hour. The air was damp, carrying the faint scent of mildew, a reminder of the house's decline since its glory days. Yet Poirot's mind was not on the decay around him but on the task ahead, the unraveling of a 20-year-old mystery that had drawn him back to this place. Captain Hastings emerged from his own room across the hall, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His hair was slightly disheveled, but his face lit up with the enthusiasm of a man eager for adventure. "Good morning, Poirot," he said, his voice carrying a cheer that seemed out of place in the somber house. "Slept well, I hope? Ready to tackle this mystery of yours?" Poirot turned, his eyes sharp despite the faint lines of fatigue around them. "Slept well? Non, mon ami. The mind of Hercule Poirot does not rest when there is a puzzle to be solved. The photograph, the necklace, the poison, these are the threads, and I must weave them into a pattern. Come, we shall breakfast, and then we shall see what secrets this house holds." They descended the grand staircase, its wood creaking under their steps, and entered the dining room where a modest breakfast was laid out. The table, though smaller than the one used for last night's dinner, was set with care: a pot of tea, toast, butter, and a few boiled eggs. Margaret Langley, the caretaker, was already there, her hands clasped tightly as she greeted them. "I trust you slept well, gentlemen," she said, though her eyes darted nervously toward the door. "The others will join us shortly. I've arranged for the photograph to be brought down after breakfast." "Merci, Madame Langley," Poirot said, seating himself with a grace that belied his age. "And tell me, this photograph, it was found in the attic, you say? How came it to be there, forgotten for so long?" Margaret hesitated, her fingers twisting a napkin. "The attic is full of old things, trunks, papers, furniture from the Marwood family. I was clearing out some clutter when I found it, tucked inside a book. It's unsettling, Monsieur Poirot. Eleanor looks so alive in it, and yet—" Her voice trailed off as the door opened, admitting Clara Whitmore, the reclusive widow. She was dressed in a severe black gown, her face pale and her eyes shadowed as though she too had slept poorly. She nodded curtly to Poirot and Hastings, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Next came Edward Grayson, the young historian, his spectacles glinting as he carried a thick notebook under his arm. He greeted them eagerly, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Monsieur Poirot, I've been up half the night reading about the Marwood case. There's so much to discuss. Poirot raised a hand, his expression mild but firm. Patience, Monsieur Grayson. All in good time. First we eat. The body must be sustained if the mind is to work. Inspector Harold Vance entered next, his heavy tread announcing his presence before he appeared. His face was grim, his eyes avoiding Poirot's as he muttered a greeting and sat down. The former maid, Mary Ellis, followed, her frail figure supported by a cane. She offered a shy smile, her hands trembling as she reached for a cup of tea. Finally, Lionel Marwood, the boisterous cousin, burst in, his loud voice shattering the quiet. "Morning, all. Hope we're ready for some sleuthing, eh? Old Eleanor's ghost must be rattling her chains knowing Poirot's here." Hastings stifled a chuckle, but Poirot's expression remained impassive. He sipped his tea, observing the group with a keen eye. Each person, he noted, carried an air of unease, a subtle tension that betrayed more than their words. Clara's fingers clutched her teacup too tightly. Vance's jaw was set as though bracing for an interrogation. Grayson's eagerness seemed almost forced, a mask for something deeper. Mary Ellis kept her eyes downcast, and Lionel's joviality rang hollow. Margaret, meanwhile, hovered like a nervous bird, her gaze flitting from one guest to another. As breakfast concluded, Margaret excused herself and returned with a small leather-bound box. She placed it on the table with a reverence that silenced the room. "This is it," she said softly. "The photograph." Poirot leaned forward, his movements deliberate as he opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a sepia-toned photograph, its edges curling slightly. It depicted a group of people seated around a dining table, much like the one they now occupied. At the center was a woman in her 30s, her dark hair swept up, her eyes bright with life. She wore a high-necked gown, and around her throat was a striking necklace, a delicate chain with a large ornate pendant, its design intricate even in the grainy image. "Eleanor Marwood," Margaret said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This was taken the night she died. The necklace, it was never found after that night." Poirot studied the photograph, his eyes moving over each face. There were 7 people in the image. Eleanor, radiant and unaware of her fate, a younger Clara Whitmore, then a cousin by marriage, her expression unreadable, a stern-looking man, who Poirot deduced was Eleanor's brother, Charles Marwood, Mary Ellis, barely recognizable as a young maid standing in the background, a dashing man with a mustache, likely Eleanor's rumored lover, and 2 others unfamiliar but clearly part of the household. The table was laden with food and wine, a scene of opulence frozen in time. "Most curious," Poirot murmured, his finger tracing the outline of the necklace. "This pendant, it is distinctive, non? A work of art, perhaps with a history of its own. Madame Langley, you said it was rumored to be cursed?" Margaret nodded, her eyes flicking to Clara, who stiffened. "It was a family heirloom, passed down through the Marwood women. There were stories that it brought misfortune to those who wore it. Eleanor laughed at such tales, but after her death, people whispered." Clara's voice cut through the room, sharp and cold. "Superstition, nothing more. That necklace was valuable, yes, but cursed, ridiculous. People will invent any nonsense to explain tragedy." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, Madame Whitmore, the necklace is gone. Stolen, perhaps? Or hidden? What do you recall of that night?" Clara's lips tightened. "I was young, barely 20. I remember the dinner, the laughter, and then the chaos when Eleanor collapsed. The doctor said it was poison, but no one knew how or why. The police questioned us all, but they found nothing." Inspector Vance cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "I was a young constable then, just assisting. We searched the house, interviewed everyone. The poison was in her wine, strychnine, but the bottle was clean, and no one saw anything unusual. It was a dead end." Poirot turned to Mary Ellis, who flinched under his gaze. "And you, Mademoiselle Ellis? You were there, serving that night. Did you see nothing out of the ordinary?" Mary's voice was faint, her eyes fixed on her hands. I don't remember much, sir. It was so long ago. I was just a maid, doing my duties. I didn't see anything. Lionel laughed, breaking the tension. Come now, Mary, you must have seen something. All those grand folks sipping their wine, plotting their schemes. Bet you heard plenty of gossip below stairs. Mary's face flushed, and she shook her head. Poirot noted her discomfort, filing it away for later. He turned to Grayson, who was scribbling in his notebook. And you, Monsieur Grayson, what does your research tell you of this necklace? Grayson pushed his spectacles up his nose, his voice eager. It's mentioned in old family records. The pendant was said to contain a hidden compartment, possibly for a gem or a keepsake. Eleanor's father had it made in Paris, and there were rumors it was tied to a scandal, a stolen jewel perhaps, or a secret inheritance. My theory is that someone killed her for it. Enough, Clara snapped, rising from her chair. This is all speculation, dragging up the past for no reason. That photograph proves nothing, Margaret. You're stirring up trouble for no purpose. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. I want the truth, Clara. Eleanor deserves it, and if there's a chance to find it, Monsieur Poirot is the man to do it. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. Madame Whitmore, I understand your distress, but the truth, it is like a buried treasure. It must be unearthed, no matter how painful. I shall examine this photograph further, and I shall speak with each of you in turn. Hastings, mon ami, will you assist me in inspecting the house? There may be other clues hidden in these old walls. Hastings nodded, his enthusiasm undimmed. Of course, Poirot. Shall we start with the dining room, where it all happened? An excellent suggestion, Poirot said. And Madame Langley, I shall need access to the attic where you found this photograph. There may be more to discover. The group dispersed, Clara storming off to her wing, Vance muttering about needing air, and Mary retreating to her room. Grayson lingered, offering to share his research notes, while Lionel clapped Poirot on the shoulder, declaring his confidence in the little Belgian detective. Poirot, unruffled, merely nodded, his mind already turning over the details. The dining room, when they entered, was much as it had been in the photograph, though time had dulled its splendor. The long table remained, its surface scarred but polished. The chandelier above was dusty, its crystals no longer. Chapter 3. The Cold Case. The morning at Styles Court dawned with a heavy mist that clung to the estate like a shroud, muffling the world outside and lending an air of isolation to the old house. Hercule Poirot, ever precise in his habits, was awake early, his small frame wrapped in a dressing gown as he sat at a writing desk in his room. The photograph of Eleanor Marwood and her dinner guests lay before him, its sepia tones glowing faintly in the lamplight. His fingers, though stiffened by age, traced the edges of the image with care, as if it might yield its secrets through touch alone. The necklace around Eleanor's throat, with its intricate pendant, seemed to stare back at him, a silent challenge to his intellect. Captain Hastings, less inclined to early rising, joined Poirot in the dining room an hour later, his face flushed from a brisk wash and his spirits buoyed by the prospect of the day's investigation. The room was quiet save for the clink of china as Margaret Langley set out a simple breakfast of porridge, toast, and tea. The other residents of Styles, Clara Whitmore, Edward Grayson, Inspector Vance, Mary Ellis, and Lionel Marwood, had yet to appear, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone with their hostess. Bon matin, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice soft but alert. You have slept well, I trust? We have much work to do today. The photograph, it is but the beginning. We must uncover the details of this case, the cold case, as you English call it. Hastings nodded, spooning porridge into his bowl. Cold case indeed. 20 years is a long time, Poirot. Do you really think we can get to the bottom of it? Evidence must be scarce by now. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of mild indignation. Scarce perhaps, but not absent, mon ami. The truth, it leaves traces, like footprints in the snow. They may be faint, but for Hercule Poirot they are enough. We shall begin with the case files if they exist, and with the memories of those who were here. The human mind, it is a vault, and I shall unlock it. Margaret, overhearing, approached the table, her hands clasped nervously. Monsieur Poirot, I've spoken to Inspector Vance. He has some of the old case files from 1905 kept in his cottage nearby. He's agreed to bring them this morning. I thought they might help. Excellent, Madame Langley, Poirot said, his eyes brightening. The official record, it is often incomplete, but it provides a foundation. And you, Madame, you were not here in 1905, no? How came you to be so invested in this tragedy? Margaret hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. I came to Styles 10 years ago, as caretaker. The Marwood family was gone by then, but the stories lingered. Eleanor's death, it's like a shadow over this house. When I found the photograph, I felt I had to do something. For her. Poirot studied her, noting the earnestness in her voice, but also a flicker of something else. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. He filed it away, turning his attention to the door as Inspector Vance entered, a heavy satchel under his arm. The retired detective's face was drawn, his eyes bloodshot, as though he had slept little. He set the satchel on the table with a thud, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Here they are, Vance said gruffly. Everything we had on the Marwood case. Not much, I'm afraid. We were stumped back then, and I doubt you'll find anything new. Poirot raised an eyebrow, his tone polite but pointed. Monsieur Vance, it is not the quantity of evidence that matters, but its quality, and the perspective of Hercule Poirot. It is unique. May I? Vance nodded, and Poirot opened the satchel, revealing a collection of yellowed papers, photographs, and handwritten notes. Hastings leaned over, curious, as Poirot began to sort through them with meticulous care. The files detailed the events of September 12, 1905, the night Eleanor Marwood died. She had been 32, the only daughter of a wealthy merchant, married to a distant cousin, Thomas Marwood, who had died 2 years earlier. The dinner party at Styles had been a grand affair, with 8 guests: Eleanor, her brother Charles, Clara, Whitmore, then Clara Beaumont, a cousin by marriage, Mary Ellis, the maid, a family friend named Victor Langley, no relation to Margaret, a local doctor named Philip Grayson, Edward's father, and 2 others, a business associate and his wife, both now deceased. The report described the evening, a lavish meal, fine wine, and lively conversation, until Eleanor suddenly collapsed, convulsing, her face contorted in agony. The doctor, Grayson, had pronounced it strychnine poisoning, likely administered through her wine. The bottle, a rare vintage from the Styles cellar, was tested and found clean, as were the glasses. No fingerprints, no clear motive, no witnesses to any tampering. The necklace noted in the guest descriptions was missing when Eleanor's body was examined, and despite a thorough search, it was never found. Poirot paused at a page of witness statements, his eyes narrowing. Curieux, he murmured. The statements, they are inconsistent. Monsieur Charles Marwood claims he left the dining room briefly to fetch a cigar, yet Mademoiselle Ellis says she saw him at the table throughout the meal. And Madame Whitmore, she says she noticed nothing. Unusual, yet her statement is so brief, so vague. It is as if she wished to say nothing at all. Hastings frowned, peering at the papers. Sounds like someone's lying, or maybe they just forgot. It was a chaotic night by all accounts. Forget? No, Hastings, Poirot said, tapping the page. The human memory, it is selective. It forgets what it wishes to forget and remembers what it cannot escape. These inconsistencies, they are not accidents, they are clues. Vance shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We questioned everyone thoroughly. Charles had debts, sure, but no proof he'd harm his sister. The maid was just a girl scared out of her wits. Clara was barely involved. She was young, a guest, not family. Victor Langley, the friend, was the main suspect for a while. Rumors. He was in love with Eleanor, maybe jealous, but he had an alibi. Stepped out to the garden with the doctor just before she collapsed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. An alibi, you say? And yet alibis, they can be constructed, like a house of cards. Tell me, Monsieur Vance, what was your impression of this Victor Langley? Vance shrugged, his voice grudging. Charming fellow. Too charming, if you ask me. Had a way with words, always smiling. But we couldn't pin anything on him. He left for America a month later, never came back. Poirot made a mental note, then turned to another document, a coroner's report. It confirmed strychnine, a fast-acting poison, likely ingested within minutes of her collapse. The timing suggested the poison was in her wine, but the clean bottle puzzled him. The method, he said softly, it is clever. To poison the wine without tainting the bottle, this requires precision, planning. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. As Poirot continued his examination, the other residents began to filter into the dining room. Clara Whitmore entered, her face pale but composed, and took a seat far from the satchel. Edward Grayson followed, his notebook already open, his eyes bright with curiosity. Mary Ellis came next, her steps slow and hesitant, and Lionel Marwood burst in last, his loud greeting shattering the tense silence. "Well, well," Lionel said, clapping his hands. "The great detective at work already. Found the killer yet, Monsieur Poirot? Or are we still chasing ghosts?" Poirot smiled faintly, unruffled. "Ghosts, Monsieur Marwood? No. I chase the truth, and it is very much alive. Tell me, you were not at the dinner in 1905, but you knew Eleanor, oui? What was she like?" Lionel's grin faded slightly, and he leaned back in his chair. Eleanor? A firecracker she was, beautiful, sharp as a tack, and not one to suffer. Fools. She ran styles like a queen even after Thomas died. But she had enemies, plenty of folks jealous of her wealth, her charm. Charles, her brother, was always in her shadow, and he didn't like it. Clara's voice cut in sharp and cold. "That's enough, Lionel. You weren't even here half the time. Don't speak of things you don't understand." Lionel raised, his hands mockingly defensive. "Just telling it like it was, Clara. No need to get your feathers ruffled." Poirot observed the exchange, noting Clara's quick temper and Lionel's provocative tone. He turned to Mary Ellis, who sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "Mademoiselle Ellis, you served at the dinner. The wine, it was poured from the bottle, oui? Did you handle it yourself?" Mary's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, sir. The butler poured the wine. I only brought the trays from the kitchen. I didn't touch the glasses. And this butler," Poirot pressed, "where is he now?" "Dead," Vance interjected. "Died in '07, heart attack. We ruled him out anyway. He had no motive." Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. The butler, the wine, the necklace, each detail was a thread, and he needed to find where they intertwined. He turned to Edward Grayson, who was scribbling furiously. "Monsieur Grayson, your father was at the dinner, no? What did he tell you of that night?" Edward pushed his spectacles up his nose, his voice eager but cautious. "Father didn't talk much about it. He was shaken, I know that. He tried to save Eleanor, but the poison was too fast. He always said it was a tragedy, but he never suspected anyone in particular. He did mention the necklace, though, said it was the talk of the evening, how Eleanor showed it off." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Showed it off, you say? Interesting. A woman who displays a valuable jewel so openly. She invites attention, perhaps danger. We must learn more of this necklace." Margaret, who had been listening silently, spoke up. "I can show you the attic again, Monsieur Poirot." There might be more papers, more clues. Chapter 4. The first clue. The morning mist had burned away, leaving Styles Court bathed in a pale, autumnal light that did little to dispel the oppressive air clinging to the old estate. Hercule Poirot, ever punctual, stood in the dining room, his small frame erect despite the faint ache in his joints. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, were fixed on the photograph of Eleanor Marwood's final dinner, which lay on the table before him. The image, with its frozen tableau of smiling faces and glittering jewels, seemed to pulse with secrets, and Poirot's mind was already weaving through the possibilities. The necklace around Eleanor's throat, its intricate pendant catching the light, held his attention most of all. It was, he felt certain, the first clue in unraveling the 20-year-old mystery of her death. Captain Hastings joined him, his footsteps heavy on the creaking floorboards. He carried a cup of tea, his face flushed with the morning's chill. "Good," Heavens, Poirot, you're up early, he said, setting the cup down. Staring at that photograph again, I swear you'll wear a hole through it with those eyes of yours. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. The eyes, mon ami, they see what others miss. This photograph, it is not merely a picture. It is a window into the past, and through it, I shall find the truth. The necklace, Hastings. It is no ordinary bauble. Observe its design, the way it sits so prominently on Mademoiselle Marwood. It is a statement, none. A challenge, perhaps. Hastings peered at the photograph, his brow furrowing. It's a fine piece, I'll give you that. But a clue? Seems a bit fanciful even for you. Surely the poison's the thing to focus on. Strychnine in the wine, wasn't it? Patience, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. The poison, it is the method. The necklace, it is the motive. And motive, mon ami, is the heart of every crime. Come, we shall examine this photograph more closely, and then we shall speak with our companions here at Styles. Each of them, I suspect, knows more than they admit. The dining room door opened and Margaret Langley entered, her face pale and her hands clasped tightly. She carried a small tray with a fresh pot of tea and a plate of scones, which she set down with a nervous smile. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I hope you're comfortable. I've arranged for the others to join us soon. They're uneasy, but they've agreed to answer your questions. Merci, Madame Langley, Poirot said, his gaze never leaving the photograph. This necklace, you mentioned it was rumored to be cursed. Tell me more of these stories. What did the people of 1905 say about it? Margaret hesitated, glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to overhear. It was an old tale, passed down in the Marwood family. The necklace was a gift from Eleanor's father, made in Paris, they said. Some claimed it held a hidden compartment, maybe for a jewel or a keepsake. Others said it was stolen from a noble family, and anyone who wore it met with misfortune. Eleanor didn't believe in curses. She wore it proudly, especially that night. But after she died and it vanished, people whispered it was the curse at work. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A hidden compartment, you say? Most interesting. And this curse. Did anyone in the household take it seriously? Margaret shook her head. Not Eleanor, but, Clara, perhaps. She was young then, but I've heard she was superstitious. And Charles, Eleanor's brother, he was always talking about the family's wealth, how it was tied to that necklace. I don't know if he believed the curse, but he was obsessed with its value. Before Poirot could press further, the door opened again, admitting Clara Whitmore. Her black gown rustled as she moved, her face set in a mask of cool detachment. She nodded curtly to Poirot and Hastings, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Edward Grayson followed, his notebook clutched tightly, his eyes bright with anticipation. Inspector Vance entered next, his heavy tread echoing in the quiet room, and Mary Ellis shuffled in behind him, her cane tapping softly. Lionel Marwood was the last to arrive, his booming voice announcing his presence before he even crossed the threshold. Morning all. Ready to dig up more skeletons, are we? Poirot ignored Lionel's theatrics, his attention fixed on the photograph. He lifted it carefully, holding it up to the light. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice commanding the room's attention. This photograph, it is our first clue. The necklace Mademoiselle Marwood wore. It is not merely a piece of jewelry. It is perhaps the reason she died. I ask you now, what do you recall of this necklace? Speak freely, for the truth, it cannot remain hidden forever. Clara's lips tightened and she folded her arms. I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, I don't remember much. It was a pretty thing. Gold and pearls, I think. Eleanor loved to show it off, but I didn't pay it much mind. I was only a guest that night, not part of the family drama. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he turned to Mary Ellis. And you, Mademoiselle Ellis. You were in the dining room, serving. Did you notice the necklace? Mary's hands trembled and she gripped her cane tightly. I saw it, sir. It was beautiful, sparkling in the candlelight. Miss Eleanor was proud of it, kept touching it during dinner. But after, After she fell, I didn't see it again. I swear I don't know what happened to it. Vance cleared his throat, his voice gruff. We searched the house top to bottom after the murder. The necklace was gone. Stolen, we thought, or hidden. We even dragged the pond out back, thinking someone might have tossed it. Nothing. Edward Grayson leaned forward, his voice eager. I've read about it in the family records. The necklace was commissioned by Eleanor's father in 1890 from a jeweler in Paris. There's a sketch in an old ledger, gold filigree, a large pearl at the center, and a pendant shaped like a teardrop. The rumors about a hidden compartment are true, I think. My father mentioned it once, said Eleanor, hinted it held something valuable, but she never showed anyone. Lionel chuckled, leaning back in his chair. A hidden compartment? Sounds like something out of a Penny Dreadful. My guess is someone pinched it for the money. Charles was always hard up. Bet he took it and sold it to pay his debts. Clara shot him a venomous look. That's enough, Lionel. Charles was no thief, and you know it. He loved Eleanor, even if they fought. Poirot's gaze flicked between them, noting the tension. And you, Monsieur Marwood, what do you know of Charles? You speak of his debts, his quarrels with his sister. Tell me more. Lionel shrugged, his grin fading slightly. Charles was a gambler, always at the tables in London. Eleanor bailed him out more than once, but she was getting fed up. That night I heard, well, not me, but the servants, they said Charles and Eleanor had a row in the library before dinner. Something about money, as usual. Poirot turned to Mary Ellis, whose face had gone pale. Mademoiselle Ellis, is this true? Did you hear this argument? Mary's eyes darted to Clara, then back to Poirot. I might have heard raised voices, sir. I was in the hall dusting. Miss Eleanor was angry, said something about Charles ruining the family, but I didn't listen long. It wasn't my place. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging every word. He turned to the photograph again, his finger tracing the outline of the necklace. This pendant, he said softly, it is not merely decorative. If it holds a compartment, as Monsieur Grayson suggests, what might it contain? A jewel? A secret? Something worth killing for, perhaps. He set the photograph down and rose, his cane tapping the floor. Hastings, Madame Langley. I wish to see the library where this argument took place, and then perhaps we shall return to the attic. The past, it speaks through the places it has touched. Margaret led them to the library, a cavernous room, lined with dusty bookshelves and heavy furniture. The air was thick with the smell of old leather and mildew, and a large window overlooked the overgrown gardens. Poirot moved slowly, his eyes scanning the room. He paused by a mahogany desk, its surface scarred but polished, and opened a drawer. Inside was a collection of old letters, their ink faded but legible. Regardez, he said, lifting one. It was addressed to Eleanor, dated a week before her death, from Victor Langley. The words were formal but warm, hinting at a close relationship. My dearest Eleanor, it began, I urge you to reconsider. The necklace is not worth the risk. Meet me in the garden tomorrow and we shall decide what to do. Hastings read over his shoulder, his eyes widening. Victor Langley, the family friend? Sounds like he knew something about the necklace. And this meeting in the garden? Do you think it's connected to the argument Mary overheard? Perhaps, Poirot said, folding the letter carefully. But we must not jump to conclusions, mon ami. The letter, it suggests a secret, but not necessarily a crime. We must learn more of this Victor Langley. They spent the next hour searching the library, finding little else of note. A few more letters, mostly mundane, and a ledger listing household expenses, but nothing directly tied to the murder. Poirot, undeterred, suggested they return to the attic, hoping to find more clues where the photograph had been discovered. The attic was as they had left it, a maze of trunks and dust-covered relics. Margaret pointed to the corner where she had found the photograph, and Poirot knelt, his cane propped against a crate. He sifted through a pile of books and papers, his movements slow but deliberate. Among the clutter, he found a small locked box, its surface engraved with the Marwood crest. Interesting, he murmured, turning it over in his hands. The lock was old but sturdy, and there was no key in sight. Madame Langley, do you know of Chapter 5, Suspects Resurface? The morning light filtered weakly through the heavy drapes of Styles Court, casting long shadows across the dining room where Hercule Poirot sat, his small, neat figure a study in concentration. The locked box from the attic rested on the table before him, its engraved marwood crest glinting faintly in the dim glow. Beside it lay the photograph of Eleanor Marwood's final dinner, the necklace around her throat a constant reminder of the mystery's heart. Poirot's fingers, though trembling slightly with age, hovered over the box, as if willing it to reveal its secrets. His mind, however, was far from idle, turning over the details of the past 4 days, the photograph, the note, the inconsistent statements, and now this enigmatic box. Captain Hastings entered, his footsteps brisk despite the early hour. He carried a tray with a teapot and cups, his face alight with the familiar eagerness that always accompanied their investigations. "Morning, Poirot," he said, setting the tray down. "Still puzzling over that box? Any luck finding a key?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his stern expression. "A key, mon ami, is not always a physical object. Sometimes it is a thought, a connection. This box, it is locked, yes, but its secrets will open to the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot. Come, sit. We have much to discuss before our companions join us." Hastings poured tea, his eyes flicking to the photograph. "That necklace, again. You're sure it's the key to all this? I mean, poison in the wine seems more straightforward. Someone slipped strychnine in her glass, surely." "Straightforward?" Poirot's voice carried a hint of indignation. "No, Hastings. The poison, it is the method, but the necklace, it is the why. And the why, mon ami, is what drives a crime. Today we shall speak with those who were at that dinner, those who remain at least. Their memories, they hold the truth, even if they do not know it." The door opened and Margaret Langley entered, her face pale and her hands clasped tightly. She was followed by Clara Whitmore, whose severe black gown seemed to absorb the light, her expression guarded. Edward Grayson came next, his notebook, clutched like a talisman, his spectacles glinting with nervous energy. Inspector Vance shuffled in, his grizzled face set in a scowl, and Mary Ellis followed, her frail figure leaning heavily on her cane. Lionel Marwood was the last to arrive, his boisterous greeting jarring in the tense atmosphere. Well, the detective's at it again. Found that necklace yet, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot ignored Lionel's theatrics, his gaze sweeping over the group. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "Today we return to the night of September 12, 1905, the night Mademoiselle Eleanor Marwood died. You who were there, Madame Whitmore, Mademoiselle Ellis, Monsieur Vance, you saw her, spoke with her, dined with her. And you, Monsieur Marwood, you knew her well, even if you were not present. I ask you now to recall that night, to share what you saw, what you heard. The truth, it lies in the details." Clara's lips tightened and she folded her arms. "I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was young, barely 20. I was a guest, not part of the family. I remember the dinner, the laughter, and then the horror when Eleanor collapsed. I don't know anything about the necklace or who might have poisoned her." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he turned to Mary Ellis, whose hands trembled as she gripped her cane. "Mademoiselle Ellis, you were the maid serving that night. You saw the guests, the table, the wine. Tell me, what do you recall of the necklace?" Mary's voice was faint, her eyes fixed on the table. "It was beautiful, sir. Gold and pearls with a big pendant like in the photograph. Miss Eleanor kept touching it like she was nervous. I noticed it when I cleared the plates. But after she fell, I didn't see it. I was too scared running for the doctor." Vance cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "I was just a constable then, assisting the inspector. We questioned everyone, searched the house. The necklace was gone, stolen, we figured. But we never found a trace. The poison was the focus, strychnine in her wine. We couldn't prove how it got there." Poirot's gaze flicked to the photograph, then back to Vance. "And you, monsieur? Vance, you were in the room when she collapsed, oui? Did you see nothing unusual?" A glance, a movement, a glass misplaced. Vance shifted uncomfortably. It was chaos. Eleanor was laughing one minute, then gasping, clutching her throat. Everyone was shouting, running about. I didn't see anything odd before that. The butler poured the wine and no one touched her glass but her. Poirot turned to Lionel, who leaned back in his chair, a grin playing on his lips. And you, Monsieur Marwood, you were not at the dinner, but you knew Eleanor and her brother Charles. You have spoken of his debts, his quarrels with her. Tell me more. Lionel's grin faded slightly and he shrugged. Eleanor was the queen of styles, no doubt about it. Charles was her shadow, always needing money, always resentful. I wasn't there that night, but I heard about their row in the library. Servants talk, you know. Charles wanted her to sell the necklace, said it could clear his debts. She refused, said it was her birthright. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And this argument, it was heated, Did anyone else hear it? Mary Ellis flinched, her voice barely audible. I did, sir. I was in the hall polishing the silver. Miss Eleanor was shouting, said Charles was a disgrace, that he'd ruin them all. He stormed out, slamming the door. Clara's voice cut through the room, sharp and cold. That's enough, Mary. You're making it sound worse than it was. Charles and Eleanor argued. Yes, but siblings do. It doesn't mean he killed her. Poirot studied Clara, noting the tension in her posture. Madame Whitmore, you defend Monsieur Charles with much vigor. Yet you say you were merely a guest, uninvolved. Why such loyalty to a man who is long dead? Clara's face flushed, but she held his gaze. Charles was family, even if distant. He was flawed, but he wasn't a murderer. You're digging up old gossip, Monsieur Poirot, and it's pointless. Poirot smiled faintly, turning to Edward Grayson. Monsieur Grayson, your father was at the dinner, the doctor who tried to save Eleanor. What did he tell you of that night, and of the necklace? Edward pushed his spectacles up his nose, his voice, eager but cautious. Father didn't like to talk about it. He said it was the worst night of his life, watching Eleanor die and being powerless to help. He mentioned the necklace, though, said it was the talk of the evening, how Eleanor flaunted it. He thought it might have been a motive, but he never had proof. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepling. And you, Monsieur Grayson, your research, does it shed light on this necklace? Its history, its value? Edward flipped open his notebook, his eyes bright. I found records in the Marwood archives. The necklace was made in Paris in 1890, commissioned by Eleanor's father. It's gold, set with pearls, and the pendant is said to have a hidden compartment. There's a sketch in an old ledger, quite detailed. The rumors say it held a diamond, maybe smuggled from India. If that's true, it'd be worth a fortune. Lionel chuckled, breaking the tension. A diamond, now that's a motive. Bet Charles was itching to get his hands on it. Or maybe that slick friend of hers, Victor Langley, wasn't it? Always hovering around her like a moth to a flame. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Victor Langley, oui. Tell me, Monsieur Vance, what do you recall of him? Vance scowled, his hands clenching. A charmer, like I said. Had an alibi. Out in the garden with Dr. Grayson when Eleanor collapsed. We couldn't pin anything on him, though we tried. He left for America soon. After, and that was that. Poirot turned to the locked box, his fingers tracing the crest. This box, it may hold answers. Madame Langley, have you a locksmith in the village? Or perhaps a key, hidden somewhere in this house? Margaret shook her head. No locksmith. Nearby, I'm afraid. And I've never seen a key for that box. It's been in the attic for years, forgotten. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then we shall find a way to open it. But first I wish to see the garden where Victor Langley and Dr. Grayson were that night. The setting, it may tell us something. Margaret led them outside, the air crisp and heavy, with the scent of damp earth. The garden was overgrown, its once manicured paths choked with weeds, but the layout was still discernible. A central fountain, surrounded by hedges, leading to a small gazebo where guests might have lingered. Poirot moved slowly, his cane sinking into the soft ground, his eyes scanning every detail. He paused by the gazebo, noting its view of the dining room windows. Interesting, he murmured. From here, one could see the dining room, no? And yet be unseen. Monsieur Vance, you say Victor Langley was here with Dr. Grayson when Eleanor collapsed? Vance nodded, his voice grudging. That's what they both said. The butler saw them step out and they came running when the shouting started. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. And yet alibis, they are fragile things. We shall see. They spent the next hour exploring the garden, finding little of note beyond a rusted bench and a broken statue. But Poirot's mind was alive with possibilities. The garden, the box, the necklace, they were all connected, and he was determined to find the thread that bound them. Returning to the house, he gathered the group in the library, where the locked box was placed on the desk. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice steady. This box, it may hold the secret of Eleanor's death. I ask you now, does anyone know of a key or of what this box might contain? Clara's face was impassive, but her hands clenched. Chapter 6. The Hidden Room. The morning at Styles Court was cloaked in a heavy fog, the kind that seemed to seep into the very walls of the old estate, muffling sound and blurring the edges of reality. Hercule Poirot stood in the dining room, his small, neat figure a stark contrast to the faded grandeur around him. The locked box from the attic rested on the table, its marwood crest catching the dim light, a silent challenge to his intellect. Beside it lay the photograph of Eleanor Marwood's final dinner, the necklace around her throat a persistent enigma. Poirot's eyes, sharp despite his age, lingered on the pendant, his mind turning over the clues accumulated over the past days. The note, the inconsistent statements, the whispers of a cursed jewel. Captain Hastings burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement, his usual morning sluggishness replaced by a boyish energy. Poirot, you'll never believe it, he exclaimed, his voice echoing in the quiet space. I found something extraordinary. Come with me, quick. Poirot raised an eyebrow, his mustache twitching with mild amusement. Calm yourself. Mon ami, what is this discovery that has you so animated? A clue, perhaps? Better than a clue, Hastings said, his eyes gleaming. A hidden room, in the attic of all places. I was poking around after breakfast trying to find that key for the box and, well, you've got to see it for yourself. Poirot's interest was piqued, though his expression remained composed. A hidden room, you say? Most intriguing. Lead the way, Hastings, and let us see what secrets this house has kept from us. They ascended the narrow staircase to the attic, the air growing colder and mustier with each step. The attic was as they had left it, a labyrinth of trunks, crates, and dust-covered furniture, the single window casting a feeble light through the fog. Hastings led Poirot to a corner near the back, where a heavy oak panel, half hidden behind a pile of crates, stood slightly ajar. I noticed it when I moved some boxes, Hastings said, pointing. It's a door, Poirot, but it's not on any plans of the house. I checked with Margaret. Poirot approached the panel, his cane tapping the floor. The wood was old, but sturdy, its edges seamless when closed, explaining why it had gone unnoticed for so long. He pushed it open, revealing a narrow passage leading to a small windowless room. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and time. A single lantern left by Hastings cast flickering shadows across the walls, revealing a space untouched since 1905. The room was small, barely 10 feet square, with a low ceiling and bare walls. A wooden table stood in the center, its surface cluttered with papers, a few books, and a small locked diary bound in faded leather. A chair, its upholstery frayed, was pushed against the wall, and a dusty rug covered the floor. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he stepped inside, his movements slow but deliberate. Magnifique, Hastings, he murmured. A hidden room, a secret sanctuary. This, mon ami, is where Eleanor Marwood kept her most private thoughts. Hastings followed, his excitement barely contained. Do you think she used this room to hide the necklace, or maybe the diamond Grayson mentioned? Perhaps, Poirot said, his fingers brushing the diary's cover. But this room, it is more than a hiding place. It is a reflection of her mind, her fears. Let us see what it tells us. He lifted the diary, its lock small but intricate, much like the one on the box. The cover bore the initials EM in faded gold, confirming it belonged to Eleanor. Poirot tried to open it, but the lock held firm. "Another lock," he said, a hint of frustration in his voice. "This house, it is full of secrets, each one guarded by iron and time." Hastings examined the table, sifting through the papers. Most were mundane, household accounts, letters from friends, but one caught his eye, a single sheet folded tightly, its edges yellowed. He handed it to Poirot. "Look at this, Poirot. It's in her handwriting, I think." Poirot unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the words. It was a draft of a letter, dated September 10th, 1905, 2 days before Eleanor's death. "My dearest, Victor, I cannot ignore your warnings any longer. The necklace is a danger not just to me but to all I hold dear. Charles knows too much, and I fear his desperation. I have hidden it where no one will look, but I cannot keep it safe forever. Meet me in the garden tomorrow night after the guests have gone. We must decide what to do, or I fear the worst. Yours." Eleanor Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice low. "This, Hastings, is a treasure. It confirms what we suspected. Victor Langley was involved, and the necklace was at the heart of her fears. But this mention of Charles, her brother, none. He knew something dangerous." Hastings frowned, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "Hidden it where no one will look. Do you think she meant this room? Could the necklace be here?" Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. "It is possible. Let us search, but with care. This room, it has not been touched in 20 years. The clues, they are fragile." They spent the next hour examining every inch of the hidden room. Poirot checked the walls for hidden panels, tapping gently with his cane while Hastings lifted the rug and searched under the table. The papers revealed little more, mostly lists of expenses and a few personal notes, none as revealing as the letter. The diary remained locked and no key was found. Poirot, undeterred, turned his attention to the chair, running his fingers along its seams. "Sometimes, mon ami, the simplest hiding place is the most effective." His fingers caught on a loose thread in the upholstery, and with a gentle tug he revealed a small hidden pocket sewn into the chair's lining. Inside was a single key, small and ornate, its design matching the lock on the diary. Poirot's smile was triumphant. "Voila! The key to Eleanor's secrets." He inserted the key into the diary's lock, and it opened with a soft click. The pages were filled with Eleanor's elegant script, detailing her life at Styles, her hopes, her fears. Poirot skimmed through, his eyes narrowing as he reached the final entries, dated September 1905. One passage stood out. "Charles is unbearable. He demands I sell the necklace, says it will save him from ruin. But he does not understand its true value, what it hides. Victor urges me to destroy it, but I cannot. It is my legacy, my burden. I have hidden it in the one place no one will think to look. If anything happens to me, let it be known that Charles knew too much and I fear his heart has turned against me." The entry ended abruptly, the final pages torn out, leaving jagged edges. Poirot's fingers traced the torn paper, his mind racing. The necklace, it is here in this house, and Charles, her brother, he was a threat. But who tore these pages and why? Hastings shook his head, his voice awed. "This is incredible, Poirot. She was afraid of her own brother. Do you think he poisoned her to get the necklace?" "It is possible," Poirot said. "But we must not leap to conclusions. The torn pages, they suggest someone else knew of this diary, someone who wished to hide its secrets. We must find those pages and we must find the necklace." They continued their search, but the room yielded no further clues. The fog outside thickened, casting the attic in near darkness, and Poirot suggested they return to the main house to question the others. As they descended, Margaret Langley met them in the hall, her face anxious. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found something? You've been up there for hours." Poirot held up the diary, his expression grave. "We have found
Much, Madame Langley. A hidden room, a diary, a key.
But the necklace, it remains elusive. Tell me, have you ever heard of such a room in the attic? Margaret's eyes widened and she shook her head. No, never. The attic is full of old things. But a hidden room? That's extraordinary. Poirot studied her, noting the genuine surprise in her voice. Very well. I wish to speak with the others one by one. Their memories of that night, they must be probed further. The afternoon was spent in interviews, each conducted in the library, where the locked box and diary now rested. Poirot began with Clara Whitmore, whose defensive posture was as rigid as ever. A hidden room? She said, her voice sharp. I know nothing about it. Eleanor was secretive, yes, but I was just a guest. I didn't pry into her affairs. Poirot's gaze was piercing. Madame Whitmore, you were at the dinner. You saw the necklace. Did Eleanor ever speak of it, of its value or its secrets? Clara's lips tightened. She was proud of it, that's all. Kept touching it, showing it off. I thought it was vanity, nothing more. Next, Poirot questioned Mary Ellis, whose frail hands trembled as she spoke. I never knew about any room, sir, she said, her voice barely audible. Miss Eleanor was kind to me, but she kept to herself. I saw her go to the attic sometimes, but I thought she was just checking the stores. Inspector Vance was gruff, his patience wearing thin. A hidden room doesn't change anything, Poirot. We searched the house in Earl 5. If there was a necklace, it was long gone. You're chasing shadows. Edward Grayson, however, was eager, his notebook filled with new scribbles. A hidden room. That's incredible. My father never mentioned it, but he did say Eleanor was secretive, always writing in a diary. If that's hers, it could confirm the necklace's hidden compartment. Maybe she hid the diamond there. Lionel Marwood, as always, was jovial but vague. A secret room? Sounds like Eleanor, always full of surprises. Bet she hid that necklace to keep it from Charles. He was desperate for cash, would have done anything to get it. Poirot's final interview was with Margaret, who admitted to knowing little of Eleanor beyond the household stories. The servants talked about her. Chapter 7. A psychological puzzle. The fog that had cloaked Styles Court for days lingered into the morning, wrapping the estate in a ghostly veil that seemed to mirror the secrets buried within its walls. Hercule Poirot sat in the library, the locked box and Eleanor Marwood's diary on the desk before him, their presence a constant reminder of the mystery's complexity. The photograph of the fatal dinner, with its haunting image of Eleanor's necklace, lay beside them, its details etched in Poirot's mind. His small, neat figure was still, but his eyes, sharp and unyielding, darted from one object to another, his little gray cells working tirelessly to connect the threads of the 20-year-old crime. Captain Hastings entered, his face flushed. From a brisk walk in the gardens, his enthusiasm undimmed despite the oppressive atmosphere. Morning, Poirot, he said, rubbing his hands together. Chilly out there, but it clears the head. Any progress with that diary, or are we still stumped by that locked box? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his stern expression. Stumped, mon ami? Non, Hercule Poirot is never stumped. The diary, it has revealed much, but it is the minds of those around us that hold the key. Today we shall play a game of psychology, Hastings. We shall recreate the dinner of September 12th, 1905, and observe. The truth. It reveals itself. In the smallest gestures, the unguarded glances. Hastings blinked, his brow furrowing. Recreate the dinner? You mean set the table, serve the same food and all that? What's the point, Poirot? They're not likely to confess over a plate of roast beef. Poirot's eyes gleamed with that familiar spark of determination. The point, Hastings, is to stir the memories, to provoke the reactions. The human mind, it is like a pond, calm on the surface, but disturb it and the secrets rise. We shall see who flinches, who hesitates, who betrays themselves. Come, we must speak with Madame Langley to arrange this experiment. They found Margaret Langley in the dining room, polishing the silver with a nervous energy. Her face lit up at their approach, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, good morning. Have you found anything new in the diary or that box? Poirot inclined his head, his tone polite but purposeful. Madame Langley, the diary is most illuminating, but it is the living we must now consult. I wish to recreate the dinner of 1905 as closely as possible. The same table, the same seats, perhaps even the same menu. Can this be arranged for tonight? Margaret's hands paused, her eyes widening. Recreate the dinner? Oh, monsieur. Poirot, that's unsettling. But I suppose it could be done. The kitchen still has old menus and we have enough staff to manage. But why? Do you think it will help? It will help, Poirot said firmly. Because the past, it lingers, in the present. Those who were there, Madame Whitmore, Mademoiselle Ellis, Monsieur Vance, they will remember and their memories will speak. You will inform the others, oui, and ensure they attend. Margaret nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. I'll do my best. They're not all keen on dredging up the past, especially Clara, but I'll make sure they're there. The rest of the morning was spent in preparation. Margaret unearthed an old menu from the Marwood archives, detailing the meal served on that fateful night. Consommé, roast lamb with mint sauce, potatoes au gratin, green beans, and a dessert of baked apples. The wine, a Chateau Margaux 1899, was no longer available, but Margaret found a similar vintage in the cellar. Poirot insisted on inspecting the bottles himself, his eyes scanning the labels for any sign of tampering, though he knew the poison of 1905 was long gone. As the afternoon progressed, Poirot and Hastings arranged the dining room to match the photograph. The long table was set with the same faded silver and chipped porcelain, the chairs positioned as they had been 20 years ago, based on the seating chart in the case files. Poirot placed the photograph at the head of the table, a silent reminder of the night they were recreating. It must be exact, he told Hastings, adjusting a wine glass a fraction of an inch. The mind, it responds to familiarity. We shall see who remembers too much or too little. By evening, the dining room was ready, its chandelier casting a warm but eerie glow over the scene. The fog outside pressed against the windows, isolating Styles Court from the world. The guests began to arrive, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Clara Whitmore entered first, her black gown stark against the pale walls, her expression one of barely concealed irritation. This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot, she said, taking her seat. A theatrical stunt, nothing more? Poirot smiled unruffled. Theater, Madame Whitmore. No, it is psychology. The past, it has a way of speaking when we listen. Please take your seat, where you sat in 1905, I believe, to the left of Mademoiselle Marwood. Clara stiffened but complied, her hands clenched in her lap. Mary Ellis followed, her frail figure trembling as she took her place near the door where she had stood as a maid. Inspector Vance shuffled in, his grizzled face set in a scowl, and sat across from Clara, his eyes avoiding the photograph. Edward Grayson, ever eager, took a seat near the head of the table, his notebook open, while Lionel Marwood bounded in, his joviality seeming forced. Well, this is a lark, he said, clapping his hands. Recreating a murder scene. Never thought I'd see the day. Margaret Langley took her place as hostess, though she had not been present in 1905, and signaled the staff to begin serving. The consommé was brought out, its aroma filling the room, and Poirot watched closely as the guests reacted. Clara's hand hesitated over her spoon, her eyes darting to the wineglass before her. Mary Ellis kept her gaze down, her hands folded tightly. Vance's jaw was set, his fingers drumming on the table. Grayson scribbled furiously, while Lionel made a show of enjoying his soup, though his laughter was strained. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice cutting through the clatter of spoons. Tonight, we dine as they did on September 12, 1905. The same food, the same seats, the same wine. I ask you to think back to that night, to recall every detail. Mademoiselle Marwood, she sat here. He gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table, wearing her necklace, laughing, unaware of the poison in her wine. Who among you saw something, heard something, that you have not told? Room fell silent, the only sound the faint crackle of the fire in the hearth. Clara's lips tightened and she set her spoon down with a clink. This is pointless, Monsieur Poirot. I've told you everything I remember. Eleanor was fine then. She wasn't, it was chaos. I saw nothing unusual. Poirot's eyes locked onto hers, his voice gentle but probing. Nothing unusual, Madame Whitmore? Yet you hesitate when you look at the wine glass. Why is that? Clara's face flushed and she looked away. I don't know what you mean. It's just a glass. Poirot turned to Mary Ellis, whose hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped her spoon. Mademoiselle Ellis, you served the wine that night, oui? Did you notice anything about the glasses? The bottle? Mary's voice was barely audible. I didn't pour the wine, sir. The butler did, Mr. Jenkins. I just carried the trays. I didn't see anything wrong. Vance cleared his throat, his voice gruff. We went over this in '05. The bottle was clean, the glasses too. No one saw anyone tamper with them. You're wasting your time, Poirot. Poirot's gaze flicked to Vance, noting the tension in his posture. And yet, Monsieur Vance, the poison was there. Strychnine, fast-acting. In her wine. Someone placed it there, someone clever. Tell me, did you notice Mademoiselle Marwood's necklace that night? Did it catch your eye? Vance shrugged, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. It was flashy, sure. Everyone noticed it. She kept touching it like it was a talisman or something. But it was gone when we checked her body. Edward Grayson leaned forward, his voice eager. That's what my father said too. He thought the necklace was the motive, someone wanted it or what it hid. The hidden compartment may be a diamond. Lionel laughed, breaking the tension. A diamond? That's the stuff of novels. My money's on Charles. He needed cash, and Eleanor wouldn't give it to him. Bet he slipped something in her wine and swiped the necklace while everyone was panicking. Clara's voice was sharp, cutting through the room. Stop it, Lionel. Charles was no murderer. You weren't. Even there, how would you know? Poirot observed the exchange, his eyes darting from face to face. The main course was served, roast lamb, its scent rich and heavy, and he watched as the wine was poured, a deep red liquid glinting in the candlelight. Clara's hand froze as the butler filled her glass, her eyes fixed on the liquid. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft. Madame Whitmore, you do not drink. Is there something about the wine that troubles you? Clara's head snapped up, her face pale. I don't care for wine, that's all, it's nothing. But Poirot's mind was racing. The wine glass, the hesitation, it was a small thing but significant. He filed it away, turning his attention to the others. Mary Ellis ate sparingly, her eyes downcast while Vance pushed his food around his plate, his discomfort palpable. Grayson continued to scribble, his excitement undimmed, and Lionel ate heartily, his jokes falling flat in the tense atmosphere. As dessert was served, baked apples, their sweetness a stark contrast to the mood, Poirot rose, his cane tapping the floor. Mesdames et messieurs, this dinner, it has been most illuminating. The past, it speaks to us through your actions, your words, the necklace, the wine, the chaos of Tour Hell. Chapter 8. The Missing Pages. The fog that had enveloped Styles Court for days began to lift, revealing a sky of heavy gray clouds that cast a somber light over the estate. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, precise figure illuminated by the weak glow of a single lamp. On the desk before him lay Eleanor Marwood's diary, its torn pages a silent taunt, alongside the locked box and the photograph of the fatal dinner. The necklace in the photograph, with its intricate pendant, seemed to gleam with secrets, and Poirot's mind, ever active, was piecing together the fragments of the 20-year-old mystery. The hidden room, the note, the wine glass. Each clue was a thread, and he was determined to weave them into a coherent tapestry. Captain Hastings entered, his face flushed from a morning walk, his enthusiasm undimmed by the oppressive atmosphere. "Morning, Poirot," he said, rubbing his hands together. That fog's finally clearing, thank goodness. Any luck with that diary? Those torn pages are driving me mad. Imagine what they might have said. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his stern expression. Mad, mon ami? No, they are a challenge, not a torment. The missing pages, they are the heart of this mystery, for someone removed them to hide the truth. Today we shall uncover who and why. But first we must speak with our young historian, Monsieur Grayson. His research, it may hold the key to these pages. Hastings nodded, pouring himself a cup of tea from the tray Margaret Langley had left. Grayson's been scribbling away like a man possessed. If anyone knows about those pages, it's him. But do you think he's hiding something? He's awfully keen on this case. Keen, yes, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. But sincerity, it can be a mask. We shall see. Let us summon him, and then we shall visit the village jeweler, as Madame Langley suggested. The necklace, it remains at the center of this puzzle. They sent for Edward Grayson, who arrived promptly, his notebook clutched tightly, his spectacles glinting with nervous energy. Monsieur Poirot, Captain. Hastings, he said, his voice eager. I've been going through my notes all night. I think I've found something about the necklace. Maybe it'll help with the diary. Poirot gestured for him to sit, his gaze piercing. Monsieur Grayson, you have spoken of the necklace's hidden compartment, of a possible diamond. But, tell me, have you ever come across pages from a diary in your research? Pages that might belong to Mademoiselle Marwood? Grayson's eyes widened and he hesitated, his fingers tightening on his notebook. Pages? Well, I didn't want to say before because I wasn't sure, but yes. I found some loose pages a few years ago, when I first started researching the Marwoods. They were in the county archives, tucked inside an old ledger. I thought they might be from Eleanor's diary, but they were so personal I didn't include them in my work. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but commanding. Personal, you say? And where are these pages now, Monsieur Grayson? Grayson flushed, his hands trembling slightly. I brought them with me, actually. I kept them in my room thinking they might be important someday. I didn't want to upset anyone, especially Clara. She's so protective of the family's reputation. Hastings leaned forward, his voice sharp. You've had them all this time and didn't say? Good Lord, man, those could be the key to the whole thing. Poirot raised a hand, his expression calm but firm. Patience, Hastings. Monsieur Grayson, you will fetch these pages at once. They may hold the truth we seek. Grayson nodded, hurrying from the room. He returned minutes later, clutching a small bundle of yellowed pages, their edges jagged where they had been torn from the diary. He handed them to Poirot with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Here they are. I hope they help. Poirot took the pages, his fingers handling them with the care of a jeweler examining a rare gem. The handwriting was unmistakably Eleanor's, matching the diary's script. He began to read aloud, his voice steady, as Hastings and Grayson listened intently. September 11th, 1905. The weight of this secret grows heavier each day. The necklace, my father's gift, is more than a jewel. It is a burden. The diamond within, hidden in its compartment, is not ours by right. Father told me the truth before he died. It was taken long ago from a family in India, and its return would ruin us. Charles knows, and his greed consumes him. He demands I sell it, but I cannot. Victor urges me to destroy it, to end the curse, but I am torn. I have hidden it where no one will find it, in the place only I know. If anything happens to me, let it be known that Charles's desperation drove him to betrayal. The second page was shorter, dated the morning of her death. September 12th, 1905. I meet Victor tonight in the garden to decide the necklace's fate. I fear Charles is watching, waiting. He spoke to me this morning, his voice cold, his eyes hard. He said the family's future depends on that diamond, but I see only ruin in his words. I have hidden the necklace in the hidden room, behind the panel. If I do not return, let this diary be my testament. Poirot set the pages down, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Magnifique, he murmured. The missing pages, they confirm what we suspected. The necklace holds a diamond, stolen, and Charles Marwood knew its secret. This hidden room, it is where she hid it, and someone tore these pages to keep it hidden. Hastings' eyes widened. The hidden room. We searched it, but we didn't find the necklace. Do you think it's still there, behind some panel? Perhaps, Poirot said. But the pages, they also tell us of betrayal. Charles, he was desperate, and Eleanor feared him. We must return to the hidden room, and we must open this box. The key we found, it opened the diary. Perhaps it will open the box as well. Grayson, still pale, spoke up. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Monsieur Poirot. I thought it might hurt the family, especially Clara. She's so protective of the Marwood name. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. Monsieur Grayson, the truth, it is not always kind, but it is necessary. You have done well to bring these pages to me. Now we must act quickly before others learn of them. They returned to the attic, the hidden room as they had left it, dusty, silent, and heavy with the past. Poirot tried the diary's key in the locked box, but it did not fit. Curieux, he murmured. Another lock, another secret. We must find the key or a way to open it. Hastings searched the room again, his hands probing the walls for hidden panels. He paused by the table, noticing a faint seam in the wood, barely visible. Poirot, look at this, he said, pressing the seam. A small drawer sprang open, revealing a single ornate key, its design matching the box's lock. Poirot's smile was triumphant. Bravo, Hastings. The little gray cells, they are not alone in their work today. Let us see what this box holds. He inserted the key, and the box opened with a soft click. Inside was a velvet pouch, its fabric faded but intact. Poirot opened, it revealing a small folded note but no necklace or diamond. The note was in Eleanor's handwriting, brief and urgent. The necklace is safe, hidden where no one will look. If you find this, you know the truth. Protect it, as I could not. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The necklace, it is not here. But this note, it confirms she hid it deliberately. The hidden room, the panel, she speaks of a specific place. They searched the room again, focusing on the walls. Hastings tapped each panel, listening for a hollow sound. Near the back he found one that echoed differently, its surface slightly loose. With Poirot's help, he pried it open, revealing a small cavity. Inside was a velvet-lined case, empty, but bearing the imprint of a necklace, the exact shape of the one in the photograph. Empty, Hastings said, disappointed. Someone got to it first. Or it was never here, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. Eleanor was clever. She may have hidden it elsewhere, leaving this case as a decoy. The note, it suggests she anticipated danger. They returned to the library, the empty case and note joining the growing collection of clues. Poirot summoned the others, determined to gauge their reactions to the new discoveries. Clara Whitmore entered first, her face pale but composed. What now, Monsieur Poirot? She asked, her voice sharp. More relics from the past? Poirot held up the pages, his gaze steady. These, Madame Whitmore, are the missing pages from Mademoiselle Marwood's diary. They speak of a stolen diamond, of Charles's greed, of a hidden room. What do you know of these things? Clara's eyes widened, but she quickly regained her composure. I know nothing of any pages or diamonds. Eleanor was secretive, yes, but I was not her confidant. You're chasing ghosts, Monsieur Poirot. Mary. Ellis, when shown the pages, began to tremble, her eyes filling with tears. Oh, Miss Eleanor, she whispered. She was so afraid. I heard her and Mr. Charles arguing, like I told you. But I didn't know about a diamond. Inspector Vance's face was grim, his voice gruff. This doesn't change anything, Poirot. We knew Charles had debts, but there's no proof he killed her. And a diamond? That's just rumor. Edward Grayson, however, was electrified, his notebook open as he scribbled. A stolen diamond. That confirms my research. The Marwoods had ties to India. Eleanor's father made his fortune there. If it was stolen, that's a motive for murder. Lionel Marwood laughed, though his eyes were wary. A diamond, eh? No wonder Charles was so keen on that necklace. Bet he took it and sold it before the police could blink. Poirot's gaze swept over them, noting every reaction. The necklace is gone, but its secret remains. Someone tore these pages. Someone knew of the hidden. Chapter 9. A second crime. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale golden light over Styles Court, as if attempting to dispel the lingering shadows of its past. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, meticulous figure a beacon of order amidst the dust and decay. On the desk before him lay Eleanor Marwood's diary, its newly discovered pages, the empty velvet-lined case and the locked box, each item a piece of the intricate puzzle of her 20-year-old murder. The photograph of the fatal dinner, with Eleanor's necklace gleaming at its center, seemed to pulse with secrets, and Poirot's sharp eyes, undimmed by age, studied it intently. His little gray cells were at work, weaving together the threads of the case, the hidden room, the torn pages, the wine glass, and now a new urgency that had stirred his instincts. Captain Hastings burst into the room, his face flushed. With alarm, his usual morning cheer replaced by a rare intensity. "Poirot, something's happened," he exclaimed, his voice echoing in the quiet space. "Grayson's research notes, they've been stolen. His room was turned upside down last night and he's in a state. This can't be a coincidence. Can it?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes narrowing with interest. "Stolen, you say? Most curious, mon ami. A second crime here in the present to obscure the crime of the past. This is no coincidence, Hastings. It is a sign that we are close to the truth. Come, we must speak with Monsieur Grayson at once." They found Edward Grayson in his room, a small, cluttered space in the east wing of Styles Court. Papers were strewn across the floor, drawers pulled open, and books tossed haphazardly from their shelves. Grayson sat on the edge of his bed, his spectacles askew, his face pale with a mixture of anger and fear. His precious notebook, usually clutched tightly, was missing, and his hands trembled as he spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, it happened sometime after midnight. I went to bed, and when I woke, my room was like this. My notes, everything I've compiled on the Marwood case, they're gone." Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the chaos. "Calm yourself, monsieur. Grayson, describe these notes. What did they contain? And why might someone wish to steal them?" Grayson pushed his spectacles up his nose, his voice shaking. "They were my research, years of work on the Marwood family, their wealth, the necklace. I had sketches of the necklace, letters from the county archives, notes on Eleanor's father and his ties to India. There were details about the diamond, the rumors of it being stolen. I think someone didn't want me to share it with you." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice steady. "And these notes? They mentioned the hidden room, the diaries, pages?" Grayson nodded. "Yes, I wrote about the pages I found, the ones I gave you yesterday. I also had theories about where the necklace might be hidden, maybe in the hidden room or somewhere else in the house. I was going to show you today." Hastings frowned, his hands on his hips. "Good Lord, Grayson. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Someone's clearly trying to stop us. This is getting dangerous, Poirot." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, his tone calm but resolute. "But danger? It is a sign that we are close. The thief, they fear what these notes reveal. We must act quickly, before they destroy what they have taken. Monsieur Grayson, you will accompany us to the dining room. We shall gather the others, and see who betrays themselves." They descended to the dining room, where Margaret Langley was setting out a modest breakfast of toast, tea, and boiled eggs. Her face paled at the news of the theft, her hands twisting a napkin. "Stolen? Oh, Monsieur Poirot, this is awful. Who would do such a thing?" Poirot's gaze was piercing. "That, Madame Langley, is what we shall discover. Please summon the others. We must speak with them at once." Within minutes, the dining room was filled with the familiar cast of suspects. Clara Whitmore entered, her black gown as severe as ever, her expression a mix of irritation and unease. Mary Ellis shuffled in, her frail figure leaning on her cane, her eyes wide with fear. Inspector Vance followed, his grizzled face set in a scowl, his hands clenched at his sides. Lionel Marwood bounded in last, his usual joviality tempered by a wary glance at Poirot. "What's this about a theft?" he asked, his voice loud but strained. "Someone's been rummaging through Grayson's things?" Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate. "Last night, a crime was committed in this house. Monsieur Grayson's research notes, vital to our investigation, of Mademoiselle Marwood's death were stolen from his room. This is no mere act of mischief. It is an attempt to conceal the truth. I ask you now, who among you knows of this theft?" The room erupted in murmurs, the guests exchanging uneasy glances. Clara's lips tightened, and she folded her arms. "This is ridiculous, Monsieur Poirot. You're accusing us of stealing? I was in my room all night, as I'm sure everyone was." Mary Ellis's voice was faint, her hands trembling. "I didn't hear anything, sir. I sleep poorly, but I was in my room. I couldn't." Vance's scowl deepened. "You're wasting our time, Poirot. Grayson probably misplaced his notes. Or maybe he's making it up to seem important." Grayson's face flushed with anger. "I'm not making it up. My room was ransacked, my notes gone. Someone here doesn't want the truth about Eleanor's death to come out." Lionel laughed, though it sounded forced. "Come on now, let's not get dramatic. Maybe it was a servant or some village lad sneaking in for a lark. No need to point fingers at us." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his gaze sweeping over the group. "A lark, Monsieur Marwood? No. This is deliberate, calculated. The notes, they contained information about the necklace, the diamond, the hidden room. Someone fears what we may uncover. I propose a plan, mes amis. We shall search the house room by room to find these notes, and we shall do so together, to ensure no one hides what they have taken." Clara's voice was sharp, cutting through the room. "Search my room? Absolutely not. This is an outrage, Monsieur Poirot. I won't have my privacy invaded." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Madame Whitmore, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. But the truth, it must be found, and I will not be deterred. Who will join me in this search?" Margaret, ever anxious to help, nodded. "I'll help, Monsieur Poirot. We can start with the common areas. Maybe the notes were dropped somewhere." Grayson, eager to recover his work, agreed, while Mary Ellis hesitated but nodded. Vance grumbled but consented, his reluctance palpable. Lionel shrugged, his grin returning. "Why not? Sounds like an adventure. Let's see what we turn up." Clara, after a long pause, relented, her face pale. "Fine, but you'll find nothing in my room, I assure you." The search began in the library, where Poirot carefully examined the shelves, desks, and corners. Nothing was found beyond dusty books and old papers, none related to Grayson's research. They moved to the parlor, then the dining room, checking under furniture and behind curtains. The group worked in tense silence, their eyes darting to one another, suspicion hanging heavy in the air. As they reached the upper floors, Poirot suggested splitting up to cover more ground, but he insisted on pairing each person with another, to prevent tampering. He paired himself with Clara, sensing her unease, while Hastings went with Grayson, Margaret with Mary, and Vance with Lionel. Clara's room in the west wing was as austere as her demeanor, with sparse furniture and no personal touches. Poirot's keen eyes scanned every surface, noting the neatness that bordered on obsession. He paused by her wardrobe, his fingers brushing the handle. "Madame Whitmore, may I?" Clara's lips tightened, but she nodded. "Go ahead. You'll find nothing but clothes." Inside, Poirot found only gowns and shawls, but as he moved a folded blanket, a small bundle of papers fell to the floor. Clara's face paled, and she lunged forward, but Poirot was quicker, scooping them up. They were Grayson's notes, unmistakable, with his cramped handwriting and sketches of the necklace. "Madame Whitmore," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, "how came these to be in your possession?" Clara's hands clenched, her voice shaking. I found them in the hall this morning. I was going to return them, but I didn't want to cause a fuss. I don't know how they got there." Hastings, who had joined them, looked incredulous. "Found them? Clara, your room was locked. You're saying someone broke in, left the notes, and left without a trace? Poirot held up a hand, his eyes never leaving Clara's. Enough, Hastings. Madame Whitmore, your explanation, it is curious, but we shall keep these notes safe. Monsieur Grayson, you will verify them, oui? Grayson, who had entered with Hastings, snatched the papers, his face a mix of relief and anger. These are mine, every page. But why, Clara? Why hide them? Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she held her head high. I told you I found them, I didn't steal them. You're all jumping to conclusions. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Conclusions, madame? No, we are gathering clues. This theft, it is a second crime, and it tells us the first crime, the murder of Mademoiselle Marwood, is not forgotten. Someone fears the truth. The search continued, but no further evidence was found. The group reconvened in the library, the tension thicker than the morning fog. Poirot placed the recovered notes on the desk alongside the diary and box. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, this theft, it is a desperate act. The notes, they speak of the necklace, the diamond, the hidden room. Someone wished to keep them from... Chapter 10. The Trap Springs. The morning light filtered through the heavy clouds, casting a muted glow over Styles Court, where the air seemed charged with the weight of secrets long buried. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, precise figure a beacon of calm amidst the gathering storm of the investigation. On the desk before him lay Eleanor Marwood's diary, its recovered pages, the empty velvet-lined case and the locked box, each item a testament to the complexity of the 20-year-old murder. The photograph of the fatal dinner, with Eleanor's necklace at its heart, was propped against a candlestick, its sepia tones a constant reminder of the mystery's core. Poirot's sharp eyes, undimmed by age, studied the scene, his little gray cells weaving together the clues, the hidden room, the stolen notes, the wine glass, and now the trap he had set the previous night. Captain Hastings entered, his face alight with anticipation, his morning walk forgotten in the wake of Poirot's bold announcement at dinner. Poirot, that was a masterstroke last night, he exclaimed, his voice echoing in the quiet room. Telling them we found the necklace brilliant. I wager someone's sweating bullets this morning. Have you noticed anything yet? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his stern expression. Sweating bullets, mon ami? A colorful phrase, but apt. The trap, it has been sprung, and now we must watch where the prey runs. The announcement, it has stirred the waters and the ripples, they will reveal the truth. Come, we shall breakfast with our companions and observe. The thief, they will betray themselves. They descended to the dining room, where Margaret Langley was setting out a simple breakfast of porridge, toast, and tea. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged the cups. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, good morning, she said, her voice strained. After last night, everyone's on edge. Do you really think the necklace is here? Poirot inclined his head, his tone enigmatic. The necklace, Madame Langley, is a symbol of the truth we seek. Whether it is here or not, the announcement has served its purpose. Please ensure the others join us. We have much to discuss. The dining room soon filled with the familiar cast of suspects, their faces a mix of unease and curiosity. Clara Whitmore entered first, her black gown as severe, as ever, her expression guarded but her eyes darting nervously. Mary Ellis shuffled in, her frail figure leaning heavily on her cane, her face pale with fear. Inspector Vance followed, his grizzled features set in a deeper scowl than usual, his hands clenched at his sides. Edward Grayson came next, clutching, his recovered notebook, his spectacles glinting with anxious energy. Lionel Marwood bounded in last, his boisterous greeting tinged with a wary edge. Well, Poirot, you've got us all in a tizzy with that necklace talk, he said, clapping his hands. Care to share where you found it? Poirot took his seat, his movements deliberate, his gaze sweeping over the group. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice calm but commanding. Last night I announced that the necklace of Mademoiselle Marwood had been found. This was, perhaps, a provocation, a trap to see who among you would react. And react you have. The theft of Monsieur Grayson's notes, the tension in this room. It tells me that the truth is close. I ask you now who knows more than they have admitted? The room fell silent. The clink of teacups the only sound. Clara's lips tightened and she folded her arms. This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. You're playing games, accusing us without proof. I told you I found those notes in the hall. I had nothing to do with their theft. Mary Ellis's voice was faint, her hands trembling. I don't know anything, sir. I was in my room all night. I couldn't steal anything. Vance's scowl deepened, his voice gruff. You're stirring up trouble for no reason, Poirot. That necklace is long gone and you're wasting our time with this nonsense. Grayson leaned forward, his voice eager but cautious. But what? If it's not gone? My notes mentioned possible hiding places. The hidden room, maybe the cellar. Someone didn't want us to look further. Lionel laughed, though it sounded forced. Come on, Grayson, you're as bad as Poirot with your theories. Bet the necklace was sold years ago and we're all chasing a ghost. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his fingers steepled before him. A ghost, Monsieur Marwood? No. The necklace, it is real, and its secret drives this mystery. The trap, it has revealed much. Last night, after dinner, someone moved, someone acted. And I, Hercule Poirot, have seen it. The group exchanged uneasy glances, their tension palpable. Before anyone could respond, Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Monsieur Poirot, look, she said, pointing to the sideboard, where a small folded paper lay, half hidden beneath a napkin. Poirot rose, his cane tapping the floor, and retrieved the paper. It was a note, written in a hurried scrawl, unlike Eleanor's elegant script. He unfolded it, reading aloud, Leave the necklace alone, or you'll regret it. The room erupted in murmurs, the guests leaning forward. Clara's face paled, Mary's eyes widened and Vance's jaw clenched. Grayson scribbled furiously while Lionel's grin faded. A threat! Hastings exclaimed, his voice sharp. Poirot, this proves it. Someone's desperate to stop us. Poirot's smile was enigmatique. Précisément, Hastings. The trap, it has sprung, and the thief, they have shown their hand. This note, it is clumsy, but it tells us much. The writer, they fear what we may find. We shall search again, mes amis, and we shall find the truth. He turned to Margaret. Madame Langley, when was this sideboard last cleaned? Margaret hesitated, her hands twisting. This morning before breakfast. That note wasn't there when I set the table. Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the group. Then it was placed here recently, perhaps last night after our announcement. Someone in this house wrote it. Someone who fears the necklace's discovery. I propose we search again, but this time, we focus on the places mentioned in Monsieur Grayson's notes, the hidden room, the cellar, and perhaps the library. Clara's voice was sharp, cutting through the murmurs. Another search? This is harassment, Monsieur Poirot. You've no right to invade our privacy again. Poirot's gaze was piercing. Madame Whitmore, the truth. It is not a matter of privacy. It is a matter of justice. If you have nothing to hide, you will not object. Who will join me? Margaret nodded, her face resolute. I'll help, Monsieur Poirot. We need to end this. Grayson, eager to recover any further clues, agreed, while Mary Ellis hesitated but consented, her voice trembling. Vance grumbled but joined, his reluctance clear. Lionel shrugged, his grin returning. Why not? Let's see what we dig up this time. The search began in the hidden room, where Poirot and Hastings had found the diary and empty case. The group worked in pairs, Poirot with Vance, Hastings with Grayson, Margaret with Mary, and Clara with Lionel to prevent tampering. The room was as they had left it, dusty, silent, and heavy with the past. Poirot tapped the walls again, his cane echoing in the small space while Vance stood by, his arms crossed. Nothing here, Poirot, Vance said, his voice gruff. You're wasting our time. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Patience, monsieur. Vance, the truth, it hides in plain sight. Tell me, when you searched this house in 1905, did you find anything unusual in the attic? Vance hesitated, his jaw tightening. We searched everywhere. Attic, cellar, bedrooms. Found nothing but dust. The necklace was gone, and we had no leads. Poirot paused, his cane resting against a panel. And yet, Monsieur Vance, you were quick to dismiss Victor Langley as a suspect. Why? Vance's face flushed, his voice rising. Langley had an alibi, like I told you. Out in the garden with Dr. Grayson, we couldn't pin anything on him. Poirot's smile was faint. An alibi, oui. But alibis, they can be fragile. We shall see. The search yielded nothing new in the hidden room, and the group moved to the cellar, its cold, damp air a stark contrast to the attic's mustiness. Rows of empty wine racks lined the walls, and Poirot examined the bottle of Chateau Margaux he had noted earlier, its label faded but intact. He paused by a corner, where a pile of old crates stood, and noticed a faint disturbance in the dust. A footprint fresh and distinct. Regarde, he said, pointing. Someone has been here recently. Monsieur Vance, you know this cellar well, no? Have you visited it since our last search? Vance's eyes widened, but he shook his head. Not me. I've no reason to come down here. Poirot's gaze flicked to the others, noting their reactions. Clara's hands clenched, Mary's face was pale, and Grayson's eyes darted to the footprint. Lionel chuckled, breaking the tension. Looks like someone's been sneaking about. Maybe looking for that necklace you claim you found, Poirot. B. Cellar search continued, but no notes or necklace were found. As they returned to the main house, Poirot suggested checking the library, where Grayson's notes had been discovered. The group combed through shelves and drawers, but nothing surfaced. Poirot, undeterred, gathered them in the dining room, the threatening note on the table before him. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice steady. The trap has revealed much. This note, the footprint, they tell us the thief is among us and they are afraid. I shall now reveal another truth. The necklace, it has not been found, not yet. But the announcement, it has flushed out our prey. Monsieur Vance, I ask you now, why did you visit the cellar last night? Vance's face turned red, his voice rising. I didn't. You're accusing me without proof, Poirot. Chapter 11. The Jeweler's Secret. The morning sun rose over Styles Court, its rays piercing the lingering clouds to bathe the estate in a soft golden light that seemed to promise clarity after days of fog and secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, meticulous figure a study in concentration as he arranged the clues before him. Eleanor Marwood's diary with its recovered pages, the empty velvet-lined case, the locked box, and the photograph of the fatal dinner, its necklace gleaming with unspoken truths. The threatening note from the previous day lay beside them, its crude scrawl a stark reminder of the second crime that had shaken the house. Poirot's sharp eyes, undimmed by age, moved from one item to another, his little gray cells weaving together the threads of the 20-year-old murder, the hidden room, the stolen notes, Mary Ellis's revelation, and now the trap that had flushed out new confessions. Captain Hastings entered, his face flushed with the crisp morning air, his enthusiasm tempered by the weight of the investigation's latest developments. Morning, Poirot, he said, setting down a cup of tea. That was quite a show yesterday, Vance and Mary spilling their secrets. But do you think Charles really poisoned Eleanor? And what about that necklace? We're off to the jeweler. Today, aren't we? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his stern expression. Oui, mon ami, we visit the jeweler today. The necklace, it is the heart of this mystery, and the jeweler, he may know its secrets, its design, its hidden compartment, perhaps its fate. As for Charles, Mademoiselle Ellis's testimony is damning, but the poison, it suggests a mind more cunning than a desperate thief. Come, we shall breakfast, and then we shall depart for the village. The truth, it awaits us. They joined the others in the dining room, where Margaret Langley had laid out a modest breakfast of scones, butter, and tea. The atmosphere was heavy with tension, the guests' faces reflecting the shock of the previous day's revelations. Clara Whitmore sat rigidly, her black gown absorbing the light, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Mary Ellis, frail and tearful, kept her gaze downcast, her hands trembling as she sipped her tea. Inspector Vance, his grizzled face set in a scowl, muttered under his breath, still smarting from his confession. Edward Grayson clutched his notebook, his spectacles glinting, with nervous energy, while Lionel Marwood, unusually subdued, offered a weak grin. "Morning all," he said, his voice lacking its usual boisterousness. "Ready for another day of sleuthing, Poirot?" Poirot took his seat, his movements deliberate, his gaze sweeping over the group. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "Yesterday we uncovered truths long hidden. Mademoiselle Ellis saw Charles Marwood take the necklace from his sister's body, and Monsieur Vance concealed his knowledge of Victor Langley's meetings with Eleanor. These are steps toward the truth, but the mystery remains. Who poisoned Mademoiselle Marwood, and where is the necklace? Today I shall visit the village jeweler who may know of its design. I ask you to remain here, for I may have questions upon my return." Clara's lips tightened, her voice sharp. "This is becoming absurd, Monsieur Poirot. Charles is dead, the necklace is gone, and you're chasing rumors. Why drag us through this again?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his tone gentle but firm. "Madame Whitmore, the truth, it is not a rumor. It is a necessity. The necklace, it holds a secret, a diamond perhaps, or something more. And someone in this house fears its discovery. I shall return before evening and we shall speak again." Margaret, ever anxious to help, spoke up. "I've arranged for a car to take you to the village, Monsieur Poirot. The jeweler, Mr. Harrow, is old now, but he worked for the Marwoods years ago. He might remember the necklace." Poirot nodded, his mind already turning to the visit. "Merci, Madame Langley. Hastings, you shall accompany me. The rest of you, I urge you to reflect. What do you see on that night of September 20th, 1905, that you have not told?" The breakfast ended in silence, the guests dispersing with uneasy murmurs. Clara retreated to her wing, Mary to her room with Margaret's assistance, and Vance stormed outside, muttering about needing air. Grayson lingered, offering to share more research, but Poirot declined, his focus on the jeweler. Lionel followed them to the hall, his grin returning. "Good luck, Poirot," he said. "Hope you find something shiny." The drive to the village was short, the car rattling along the winding road through fields and hedgerows. The village, a cluster of stone cottages and a church, was quiet, its inhabitants going about their daily tasks. Mr. Harrow's shop was a small, cluttered building, with a faded sign reading Harrow and Sons Fine Jewels. The bell above the door jingled as Poirot and Hastings entered, and an elderly man with a shock of white hair emerged from the back, his eyes sharp despite his stooped frame. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my colleague, Captain Hastings. We come seeking information about a necklace once owned by the Marwood family, worn by one Mademoiselle Eleanor Marwood in September 1905. Harrow's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "The Marwood necklace? I remember it. A fine piece, golden pearls with a teardrop pendant. Mr. Marwood, Edward Marwood, Eleanor's father, commissioned it from my father in Paris, back in 89 or 90. What's your interest in it, sir? It's been gone 20 years since that terrible night." Poirot's gaze was piercing, his voice steady. "We are investigating that night, Monsieur Harrow. The murder of Mademoiselle Marwood. The necklace, you say it was unique. Did it have a hidden compartment, perhaps for a jewel?" Harrow hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his spectacles. "A compartment? Aye, it did. Mr. Marwood insisted on it, said it was for a keepsake, something personal. I never saw what was in it, but there were rumors. A ruby, maybe a diamond. I was young then, just learning to trade, but I helped repair the clasp once before Eleanor wore it. She came to me herself, a lovely lady but worried. Said the necklace was her burden." Hastings leaned forward, his voice eager. "Her burden? Did she say why? And do you know what happened to it after her death?" Harrow shook his head, his expression somber. "She didn't say much, just that it was a family matter. After she died, the police came asking, but I couldn't help them. The necklace. It vanished that night. I never saw it again, but He paused, glancing toward the door as if to ensure privacy. There was something odd. A week after the murder, a man came to my shop asking about the necklace. He didn't give a name, but he was tall, with a foreign accent. American, I think. He wanted to know if I'd bought it or seen it. I told him no, but I got the sense he knew more than he let on. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest, his voice sharp. A man with an American accent? Describe him, Monsieur Harrow, if you please. Harrow frowned, rubbing his chin. Tall, dark hair, a mustache, bit like yours, sir, but fuller. He was charming, but his eyes cold. He left when I couldn't tell him anything, and I never saw him again. I always thought it might have been that friend of Eleanor's, Langley, wasn't it? Victor Langley. Heard he went to America after the murder. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, his mind racing. Victor Langley, oui. Most interesting. Monsieur Harrow, one final question. Did the necklace have any markings? Something to identify it beyond its design? Harrow nodded slowly. Aye, inside the pendant there was an engraving. A small crest, the Marwood crest, and the initials EM and for Edward Marwood. If you find it, you'll know it's the real thing. Poirot bowed, his voice warm. Merci, Monsieur Harrow. You have been most helpful. If you recall anything else, you will inform us, oui? Harrow agreed, and Poirot and Hastings left the shop, the bell jingling behind them. As they walked back to the car, Hastings' voice was animated. Poirot, that's a breakthrough. A hidden compartment, confirmed, and Victor Langley sniffing around after the murder. Do you think he took the necklace? Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. But Langley, he had an alibi. Out in the garden with Dr. Grayson when Eleanor collapsed. And yet, his interest in the necklace after her death, it is suspicious. We must learn more of this man, and we must find the necklace. The engraving, it is a clue, mon ami, a way to know the true jewel from a false one. They returned to Styles Court by midday, the sun now higher, but the air still heavy with the weight of the investigation. Margaret greeted them in the hall, her face anxious. Monsieur Poirot, you're back. Did Mr. Harrow know anything? Everyone's been restless since you left. Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the hall. The jeweler, he has confirmed much. The necklace, it had a hidden compartment, and an engraving that marks it as Marwood property. But there is more, Madame Langley. Where are the others? I wish to speak with them. Margaret led them to the dining room, where the guests were gathered, their faces reflecting a mix of unease and curiosity. Clara sat rigidly, her eyes fixed on her teacup. Mary Ellis trembled, her cane resting against her chair. Vance's scowl was deeper than ever, his hands clenched. Grayson scribbled in his notebook, while Lionel tried to lighten the mood with a weak joke. Back from the village, Poirot? Find that necklace yet? Poirot stood at the head of the table, his cane tapping the floor, his voice commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, the jeweler has provided valuable information. The necklace of Mademoiselle Marwood had a hidden compartment, as Monsieur Grayson suspected, and an engraving T.